In this lesson, we are going to be creating a spreadsheet and a function that's going to interact with the data in the spreadsheet, apply a condition, and then update some of the properties of those items within the spreadsheet. Run the function right now looking for the cells that have a value of 5, and we're applying the properties of adding a purple background, white font color, and a font size of 16 to the cells that are matching and equal to 5. And you can change this number, so I'm just changed it to 6. So it's going to now select the elements that match the criteria and apply the property values to it. So let's go ahead, log into our Google accounts, go over to Drive, and we're going to need a spreadsheet for this example. So creating a brand new spreadsheet to run this example. I'm going to give the spreadsheet a name, calling it Test 1. And I'm also going to apply a name to the sheet. That's the first sheet, and I'm going to give it a name of test. So within the values, populate some numbers here, and then we'll use these numbers to run through and check within the example code. Give us some data that we can work with, and we're going to be scanning through, selecting the cells that have a value of 5, and then applying a background color to those values. So now let's go ahead and open up the editor to select the content from the spreadsheet. So under Tools, Script Editor, and this is going to be a bound script, so it's going to be bound to the spreadsheet. So allowing us to make a selection by selecting the active spreadsheet. So go ahead and we'll give this one a name of Test 1 as well. And within the function, we're just going to stay with the default my function. What we want to do is we want to select the active spreadsheet. So I'm going to put it into a sheet object. So I'm going to just give it a name of SS. And then using the SpreadsheetApp class, we're going to get the active spreadsheet. So it's going to allow us to select the current active spreadsheet. And then within the logger log, we can output the SS object. And let's run the function, see what happens. And executing within the execution log, I'm also going to log out that spreadsheet object. And first up, whenever we're accessing the spreadsheet using the Google Apps script, we need to accept the permissions. So I'm running through and selecting, adding, and accepting the permissions for the app to see, create, and delete all the Google spreadsheet and interact with the Google Sheets. So once we run and execute the function, we get returned back the spreadsheet object. So this represents the spreadsheet object that's returned back. So that means that we want to also select the sheet object. So the spreadsheet as a whole, but we want to look at the sheet individually. So we're going to just link it together and get sheet by name. And this is where we can select the sheet using the string name that we had assigned to the sheet. So we had just called it test. So make sure that that corresponds with the value of the sheet down there. And we'll run it one more time. Instead of the spreadsheet object, we've got the sheet object now. So within the sheet object, this is where we can get the data and get all of the values that are contained within the sheet object. And because this is an object, I'm going to use const. Selecting the sheet object and then using the get data range. So what this function will do is this is going to select all of the data within the sheet in an equal dimension format. So what I mean by that is if we have another row but we haven't populated all of the cells, it will select everything where we've got content within the columns and then everything that we've got content in the rows. So even if we had just one value down here, this would still count and it would select everything from A to F on the columns and from 1 to 28 on the rows. So I'm going to just remove out this excess and we're going to select using the get data range, and what we want is we want to get the values that are contained within that data range. So use the get values, and then instead of the log outputting the sheet object, we're going to output all of the data that we have within the sheet itself. So when we run the my function now, we get an array that has all of the rows nested within it as arrays as well. And this means that now we can loop through the data. And again, if we were to add a value somewhere down here within row number 19, column F, and we execute that same function, now we've got that full selection of data, and these are just the blank cells that don't have any contents in them. And then that's the last one where we've got data. So that's what the get data range does, is it selects all of the available data by rows and columns, and that allows you to use it within your script. So now we can take the data, and using the for each method will allow us to loop through, and each one of the rows is going to be an array. And to get the index value of the row, so we can get the row index value using the for each. So if you were to do a log and to see the row array, and I'll comment out the data since we don't need that anymore, and now we run the function again, that returns back all of the rows that we're using. So it's going to return back all 14 rows of data as an array. So just as we had the array of data that we looped through and we iterated through to get each one of the rows individually, we can use the rows individually and select out all of the columns to get the cell values. So using the row array for each, and we'll get back the data value from that. And this is going to return back the index value. So this is going to be referencing the column index value. So this value we can then use in order to select the cell values from each one of the cells. So the value of data, and that's actually, this will just be the cell value. So if we want to output each one of the cell values, we could do that. And so now our function is going to output each one of the cell values. So let's run the script, and we get all of the cell values being output. So now we can apply a condition to check to see if the value of the cell, if we want to check if it's equal to 5, and if it is, then we want to do something to that cell. So let's select those values that are equal to 5. And we'll return back the row index value for that. And save it and run that one more time. So it looks like we get 3 results there. So 1, 4, and 10. Let's go back into our data, and we can see that we've got, for starting at row with index value of 0, and then we've got 1, and 5 would actually be 4, and 10 would be 11. So we're returning back all of those relevant values of 5. So let's select that cell individually. In order to select the cell, we already have the spreadsheet object and the full sheet object. And we need to select a range. So with this method, we can select a range of what we want to return back. And so this is going to be our range of the item, of the selected cell that matched the criteria. So we're looking through the array of values in order to match the criteria and apply the condition. And then once we've met that condition, then we can do something with the values. And we've got the values that are going to be contained within it, within the range. So we've got an index value for the row, adding 1 to that. And then we've also got a column index value that we can use in order to select our range. And for the range, we can get the value of the range object. So get value, and let's log that value out into the log. So that should simply return back the value of the cell. So we get those values of 5, because of course that's what we're looking for within the array. So once we've selected the range, we can also do things like set the background. So we can get all of the values, or we can get the one value. We can get some information contained for it. So we can get the number of columns, number of rows, And we can also set values into it. So what I wanted to do is I actually want to set a background and set the background color. So this is expecting a string parameter. So let's set it as red. And now when we run the function, we get the outputs into the log, but we also can go back to the spreadsheet and we see that these values have now been changed to red. So that means that anywhere that I might have a 5 within the spreadsheet should change to a red background. And let's update this. We'll change it to a blue background. So run the function. And anywhere within the spreadsheet, if we have a value of 5, it will update it to blue. And now that you've selected the range, you can also set the font color and range, set the font size. And the font size is actually going to be a numeric value, so just set it to 16. And run. Let's see what happens. So now when we go back out into the spreadsheet, we've made the update to the cells. We can update this condition to be looking for 11. And you could also look for a string value of 11. So that will match up the values where we've got the 11s on the page and make the updates to it. How about we turn these ones to be green? And so let's do a quick run through of this function and what it does. So first off, it selects the active spreadsheet and then gets the sheet by the name of the sheet. It gets all of the data that's on the sheet, so it gets the values of the data on the sheet within a nested array. So each one of the rows is going to be its own array that's nested within the main data array. We can loop through the data array to pull out the rows of content and then loop through each one of the rows individually using the for each. We're also returning back the relevant index value for the row. So the index value, and because this works the same way as arrays, it's going to start out at 0, but we know that we've got the range where we're selecting starting at 1. So that's why we need to add the 1 to the row, add the 1 to the column, so that we can select the correct cell that matches this condition and get the range. And once you've got the cell range, then you can apply various properties to that range. You can even get the value of that range, and you can also set the value of the item within the range.